Hello and welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. I'm Dr. Carmen Imes, Associate Professor of Old Testament at Biola University. I would like to begin this video with a bit of follow-up on last week's video because it touched on a very controversial topic, the topic of immigration. And some of the responses that I got online, either in the comments here or in comments on social media, indicated that some people made assumptions about my views that I did not say. And so let me just clarify, I did not say we should have open borders. I did not say we should tolerate lawlessness. I did not say that the United States is ancient Israel or that we are a theocracy and so that the laws directly apply to us nationally. However, here's what I do believe. I believe that nations like the United States will be judged by God for the way that we treat our neighbors. You can see an example of this in Amos chapters 1 and 2, where God judges the surrounding nations not for their violation of Torah, but for their unneighborly behavior, for the excessive violence that they express towards their neighbors. I also believe that believers, as believers in Jesus, we have been grafted into the covenant that began at Sinai, and therefore that we will be held accountable for embodying the principles of Torah and demonstrating the character of God in the way that we interact with others. That includes the way we treat our neighbors who are here, who have come by various means. Again, as I said last week, we don't have to choose between good border policies and neighborly behavior. We can be neighborly towards people and also work for better policies, such as better border security. So with that clarification, I want to turn to Exodus 22, verses 28 to 31. In Hebrew, it's verses 27 through 30. This may seem like a very random list of topics, but all of these have in common a concern for holiness. Do not treat God contemptuously. Do not curse a leader among your people. Your full yield and your grape juice do not hold back. The firstborn of your sons you must give to me. You must also do this for your bull, for your flock. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. Become my holy men. The flesh in the field torn by wild animals you shall not eat. You must throw it to the dogs. Okay, in verse 28, some people take the word Elohim to refer not to God, but to human judges. They're pointing to the similarities between the word leader or prince in the following line. So there's a kind of parallelism there. However, the rest of the section concerns proper worship for God's people. So I take this to be referring to the deity. Exodus 18:15, which we read previously, you can go back to that video if you're interested, indicates that the people approached Moses to get a ruling from God. That suggests that to come to the deity or to come to God involves coming to God's appointed leader to receive a verdict. So the fact that they're coming to the deity does not exclude human participation, but it does not mean that the word deity is referring to the human leader. The word meaning to treat contemptuously, the word kalal, is a synonym for the word curse or arar in the following line. That is to blaspheme or think lightly of. We have an example of this kind of behavior in Leviticus chapter 24, which you can look at on your own. Durham puts it this way. He notes in his commentary that to curse a leader is to attempt the negation of a blessing of Yahweh, thus an act of disrespect for the divine authority. So to curse God or one he's appointed to leadership is unconscionable, according to this command. Verses 29 to 30 talk about the obligation to give first fruits to God. The first fruits of Israel's produce were to be offered to God. The phrase full yield is rendering the Hebrew word malea, which means fullness, and it probably refers to the grain harvest. The sense is that God has provided abundantly, and that should provoke a response of abundance in gratitude, recognizing that everything they have comes from God. The term for grape juice is dema, and that probably refers to the fruit of the vine before it has been fermented. So waiting until the juice fermented would present the temptation to keep what properly belonged to God. So God says, bring me the juice before it's even turned into wine. It could also refer, that word dema could include any liquid harvest, including olive oil, the first pressing of which was the most precious and most holy. Alternatively, the terms malea and dema maybe are supposed to be combined, like used together. And in that case, it would simply mean the best of your harvest, whatever kind of harvest you have. Not only the produce of their land, but also the produce of their herds and of their family belonged to God. So to dedicate the firstborn to God recognizes that God is responsible for fertility. Everything we have belongs to him. The firstborn animals were supposed to be sacrificed, whether they were large animals such as bulls or oxen, or smaller animals like sheep or goats. Firstborn sons, on the other hand, were to be redeemed. Child sacrifice was never permitted in ancient Israel. For more on that, you can check out Jeremiah 7:31, 19 verse 5, and 32 verse 35. So why did the animals have to stay with their mother for 7 days? If you've ever given birth, shout out to you females out there who've born children, you will understand that allowing the animals to stay with their mothers for 7 days was likely to ease the mother's loss and allow her to nurse rather than to become engorged with milk. It's very painful when you've just given birth to not be able to nurse. Nursing is beneficial for the mother as well as the child. It stimulates uterine contractions, helping the womb go back to its right size. It regulates hormones, and it reduces the chance of breast cancer. So it's interesting that the nursing period is a week. We have had several references to a weekly cycle in the book of Exodus, and for a firstborn to be nursed for a week sort of evokes the idea that circumcision happens on day 8. So it kind of fits that cycle of newborn and giving over to Yahweh. Verse 31 is a bit unusual. The phrase holy men is unique to this passage. We don't see it anywhere else in the Old Testament. It could either refer just to males or it could be used generically. The holiness of God's people, that is, their consecration to Yahweh's service, stipulates certain dietary restrictions. So notice that you are to be holy men or become my holy men immediately precedes some dietary laws. You're not supposed to find a carcass that's torn up in a field and eat it. That's off limits for you. Dogs can eat it, but you may not. The same dynamic holds in Deuteronomy 14 verses 1 and 2, which emphasizes Israel's holy status as a nation before God. And then the following verses 3 through 21 of Deuteronomy 14 prohibit certain foods. So it seems like the dietary laws are specifically linked to their holy status as God's people. And by holy, we mean set apart. They are to be different from the nations. They're to be distinct, and that distinctiveness is expressed in what they eat. Different cultures have various dietary restrictions or dietary practices. I will never forget working in the Philippines among Muslim people. One day I was in the market and I was squatting down on the side of the road with the rest of them, just sort of like sitting around talking with my friends who were Muslim street vendors. And all of a sudden a look of terrible disgust came over their faces, and I heard a strange sound that I couldn't identify. And they were all looking at something in the street behind me, and I turned around and there was a giant truck carrying pigs to market. And for Muslims, pigs are off limits. Pork is not to be eaten, just as it is for Jews. And so they had a lifetime of avoiding eating pork, and they just couldn't even imagine eating it. And that separation made it impossible to have table fellowship with people who didn't keep that rule. So while we were in the Philippines, we abstained from having any kind of pork products in our house. We bought new dishes and didn't have any pork in our house so that we can invite our Muslim friends over and they would feel comfortable to come. And they did. purely because of that. When we first invited them, they politely declined. And then when I insisted we haven't had pork in our house and our plates are brand new, they said, oh, well, then we'll come. And they came to our house. So this is just to illustrate how deeply visceral the reaction is to food that is off limits after a lifetime of avoiding it. And when God asks his people to avoid certain foods, it would make it impossible for them to have table fellowship with people who eat those things. For the reversal of these laws and a shift in God's approach to this question, see Acts chapter 15, where the early church leaders wrestle with the question of what do we do with Gentiles who want to follow Jesus, who don't follow our food laws? Do they have to convert to Judaism, become circumcised, and eat what we eat in order to join the church? And they conclude that Gentiles do not have to keep the food laws and that there can be table fellowship between Jew and Gentile. I understand this to mean in the vision that God gives Peter with the sheet of unclean animals in Acts chapter 10, filled with unclean animals, where a voice from heaven says, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." And when Peter protests, the voice explains, "No longer call unclean what I have made clean." Peter interprets this vision correctly as an invitation to engage with Gentiles, to have table fellowship with them. This interpretation makes sense because the food laws were designed to keep Israel separate from the nations. And now a new era has begun in the early church where God wants to bring believers from all nations to be part of his covenant people. So the food laws are set aside in order to facilitate fellowship with believers across different ethnic backgrounds. Okay, so more controversy this week. No doubt some of you will disagree with me on that. There are some Christians today who believe that followers of Jesus still need to keep the food laws. There are other Christians who think that only Jews need to follow the food laws, and some who think that nobody does. So now you've heard my take on it. For more on this, you can check out commentaries on the Book of Acts. Have a great week.